Hello again, and welcome to another interview with an inspiration episode for the Rollers of Relay podcast. Today we have an indie game creator named Jared Wann, who is going to tell us a little bit about his game that he is starting on Kickstarter, which has another 34 or 5 days left, and it's about halfway there. The game is called Hypnagogic Jerks, and it sounds really cool, and we're going to talk to him today about that. So let me introduce to you Jared Wann. Jared, thanks for joining me today, man.
Oh yeah, how you doing, man? How's everybody
I'm
doing?
doing great. Doing great. Thanks for joining us, man. And we talked a little bit about before how this is your first interview, and I definitely hope it's not your last because some of the ideas that you have are really, really cool. They're really interesting and something I've never seen before in a game.
Thank you.
So before we kind of get into that, let's kind of talk about you and tell me a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I have a background basically in art, illustration, graphic design. Um, I went to the Art Institute for a little while for graphic design and illustration. I never graduated, uh, but that's my background. I've been playing role-playing games since I was maybe 14 or 15. 45 now. Um, there was a long stretch where I wasn't playing, but it was all like kind of on the periphery or whatever. Um, so what I have going on now is I'm starting a business that's a website. It's the plan is for it to launch on February 13th, and it's a you can contact me through the website and have custom picture framing done. And then it's sort of like a boutique. Will sell like art prints, photo prints, used books, games, and zines. And
Really cool.
yeah, so that's called the Hangwire. Right now, it's not operational, but you can go to www.thehangwire.com, and with the password Bossa Nova, you can check it out. You can't buy anything or anything just yet, but I'm kind of like looking around for like artists that I want to carry their prints and stuff. There's a guy named Jim Blanchard who I talked to through email. I ordered some of his stuff. He's does like these incredible portraitures of like musicians and stuff, among other things. And I just took a shot in the dark and was like, "Hey, man, do you do like wholesale deals? Do you have any protocols for that?" And he emailed me back and was like, "No, I don't have any like straight, guidelines or anything, but just tell me what you're thinking and I'll cut you a deal." So I was like,
Nice.
"Yeah, word."
Nice.
uh,
So, what kind of got you into game creation?
well, like I said, I played um, basic D&D probably a while after it came out. I think I was 14 or 15, and can't remember if I went out and bought a book. Like back then, the internet wasn't around, so it was like if the local comic shop had it, that was the only way you were getting it. And I want to say like a friend brought the books over. Uh, the whole satanic panic thing was going on, and I must have seen like a 60 Minutes or something, and asked a buddy of mine like, what is this Dungeons and Dragons thing? And if I remember right, one of my friends was just like, "Oh, I have the books, but like I don't really understand how to like be a DM or whatever." And they let me borrow the books, and I read it, and I was like, I think I can do this. And we just started playing and went from there, man. I mostly played advanced D&D um, for most of my DMing career, if you want to call it that. Um, And I didn't really know so much about a lot of the other stuff. I knew Pathfinder existed, and I knew Warhammer existed and things like that, but I didn't really get into it. And cut to years later, um, I was working in an electronics assembly plant, and my cousin kind of just hit me up out of the blue and was like, "Hey, I want to create this video game, um, a collectible card game app for phones." And I was like, "Dude, you're asking the wrong guy. I have no idea about creation. Like, I play them, but no idea where to start." And he kept bugging me like, we'll figure that out. We'll hire a developer. He was like, "What I need from you is a story and a world to play in." And I turned him down. I was like, I don't really have the time for this. I had a website going at that time. It was kind of a lifestyles, everything local underground kind of website. And I was working on that. And I would go to work. The thing he said to me was, he said, "Oh, come on, Dungeon Master. All you got to do is DM, like be a DM." And like for whatever reason, that like triggered something. And I would be at work the following week, and like stuff would just pop into my head, like world building stuff, and I'd jot it down, and like it just kept happening. Finally, it was like, I don't know, it was like 3 weeks, and I got back in touch with him, and I was like, "Hey, you know what? I will do it." And we did that for a while. Like we came up with this whole story. He wanted to do like the traditional Tolkien-esque fantasy setting, and I was kind of like, that's frankly been done. Um, what I wanted to do was like something where the player could choose the world that they wanted to play in. So we came up with this idea of like interdimensional travel, where you could take the same character from a cyberpunk setting or whatever and pop them into a medieval, you know what I mean, or a horror setting or whatever. Um, so I was doing a lot of writing for that, and we couldn't get anybody interested in like developing it. We couldn't seem to raise money or anything for it, and it kind of fell apart. And uh, I let it go. I changed jobs, and then I met my current girlfriend, and she was telling me about her daughter, um, that's really into Dungeons and Dragons. So when I met her daughter, I said, "Hey, I'm, that's cool. You're into Dungeons and Dragons. I am too." And she was like, "Really? Are you like, are we gonna play sometime?" Or and I was like, "Yeah, sure, we'll play. Like, I'll DM a game or whatever." And so I spent like I knew we weren't going to get together until Thanksgiving, and I spent like a whole year basically just developing this one session that we were going to have.
Wow.
And it turned into this whole world that we only ever just touched on. Um, but at the same time, part of what happened was, as I was doing research for like collectible card apps, I kept trying to tell my cousin like, maybe we should do like actual physical cards and forget about app. And he wasn't into that. He was like, "No, it has to be an app." Like nobody plays tabletop games anymore. And I kind of I kind of just started looking into it and quickly realized like that's totally false. Like people are way into tabletop games of all sorts.
Oh yeah.
And I just kept looking more and more into it. Um, and when I found, like, I think one of the first things I did was like I Googled buy indie TTRPGs, and like Exalted Funeral popped up or something. And I was like, these are zines. So I have uh like a punk background too. So I was like, oh, these are zines. Like I know how to do this. Like
Yeah.
so add all that stuff together, and we played our session at Thanksgiving, and everybody seemed to have a great time. And I asked my girlfriend's kid, like, what I'm thinking maybe I should publish this. And they were like, yeah, totally do it. Um, so that's it. The rest is history.
Sweet.
Sort
That's really
of
cool. However,
time, but
yeah, that's I was gonna say that's really cool. How the stars kind of aligned for you. Everything kind of came full circle eventually.
yeah, I've learned in my lifetime, um, if you keep your eyes and ears open, um, you can sort of the opportunities will come to you. You just got to recognize that they're there and go for it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, seize the moment. Absolutely, I
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
agree with that. So, I'm just getting into zine games now, and I know about zines from, like you said, having a punk rock background. Going to my local comic shop, there's a whole section just for different zines,
Yeah.
and self-published stuff. Can you give me and others that may not know kind of what makes what's so special about a zine in comparison to like your mainstream game, something like Dungeons and Dragons or a Pathfinder, or where you're waiting all year for this big core book or something that has a huge monster manual or something?
Right. There's there's a handful of things. One is price point for sure, right? So with zines, you get the modular aspect of it, where you can get, you know, supplements everywhere, here and there. But you don't have to spend a fortune each time. Like I remember collecting the advanced D&D books, and it was like 30-40 bucks every time you wanted to get a book. And you had to have the monster manual. You had to have the DM's guide and the player's handbook. So with zines, you can do that, um, you know, in a way less expensive way, for one. There's also a kind of um, intimacy, if that's the right word. Like you can get a zine, and it'll say, this was created by so and so, and an email, and you can email that person and they'll fucking talk to you. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And might even hook up with you to do some work or whatever. It's more of a community um, scene, as opposed to like some untouchable company. There's that aspect to it. There's also um, variety is a big deal. I kind of equate it. I actually been talking about this the last couple of days with people. I kind of equate it to like the craft beer scene. Like
yeah. I can see that.
if you think of like Wizards of the Coast as like Yingling or whatever, and then zines are just the multitude of other options that you
Hmm.
have. Um, and it's a big deal because there's people out there that are just frankly not interested in Dungeons and Dragons. But
Me being one of them.
I can almost guarantee you there's a role playing game out there for them. It's probably in the form of a zine.
Yeah, I mean, what got me into looking at zines was Mothership. We were kind of
Right.
talking about it before, you know. I'm a big horror and sci-fi guy, and I've been looking for. Well, one question I ask all the different groups that I've joined is, what can I find that's horror and sci-fi, almost like an Aliens type? If I was to play the Aliens the movie, that isn't the Free League's Alien game, and every single one of them said Mothership.
Oh yeah, that's Mothership. I haven't played it, but I've read it front to back,
Mm-hmm.
probably twice. And that's definitely it's a huge inspiration as far as like layout goes. The layout is just stellar.
Yeah, they waste no square inch of paper, and it's
Yeah,
all used for something.
I tried to incorporate that kind of style into Disonismics, but I don't think I did quite as good a job as Mothership. Like they did it right, man. Uh, yeah, and it's just like the artwork is like it fits. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's same thing as punk rock, right? Like you don't have to have these like virtuoso solos or like full color hyper realistic artwork, right? You can have a couple scribbles that sort of suggest an image, but the feeling behind it is obvious.
Mm-hmm. I
You know what I
agree.
mean?
I agree. Before you said Disonismics, before we move on to that, we were talking a little bit
Oh, yeah.
before also about OSR.
Mm-hmm.
When I looked into it, it stood for Old School Renaissance. What that means,
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea.
uh, well, I've also heard the term revival,
Okay.
um, old school revival. Not anywhere near as much. It's usually what you hear is old school Renaissance. So I was confused by it at first too, and I just kept, listening to people talk about it and stuff. Um, the Renaissance part, I believe, is sort of the explosion of different ideas. And what a lot of guys and gals my age never realized or knew is that actually did that same thing happened back after Dungeons and Dragons came out. All these like self-publishers were like doing their spin on Dungeons and Dragons. But the promotion wasn't there because you didn't have the internet and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like uh take Empire of the Petal Throne, for instance. I never knew that existed until like a couple months ago. But it's fucking amazing. Um, this this whole world on par with like Tolkien's Middle Earth, but like swords and ray guns instead. Um, and like I'd never heard of it, and it was around back then. So there was this renaissance that happened then that was kind of underground, and what's happening now kind of resembles that in a way.
Okay.
think that's where the Renaissance part comes from. Um, to the
Now,
best
I
to best of my
what I
knowledge.
like about those zines and what do call themselves OSR or whatever they want to brand themselves, I love the randomization tables. That's one of the
Yeah,
things that really drew me towards the zines was because, the randomization tables have unlimited replayability. I mean, you can have a brand new game every single time,
right,
and all you have is a 32-page core book, and you have a brand new game every single time.
right. Yeah, I I kind of feel like there's two camps, two schools of thought in role playing, and the OSR, um, while it's not necessarily encapsulated by the one school of thought, it definitely leans towards it. And those two schools of thought are, um, one is that, all that really matters is the story and the narrative, and um, the rules are usually pretty light, or even minimal. Um, and the other school of thought is, um, sort of like it can still be minimal rules, but there's sort of this, this sense of like nostalgia attached to it. Um, when I played back in the day, um, I mean, I played plenty of times where there was no tavern, there was no there was no story.
Mm-hmm.
You started at the entrance of a dungeon and you crawled through that dungeon and killed whatever got in your way, and that was the game. Um,
Yeah,
we everybody was murder hobos,
yeah.
and we fucking loved it. We loved it. Um, so with OSR, I think there's a sense of like, trying to like recapture that, uh, simplicity in a way of narrative, I guess. I think we're at a point now where like there's a ton of crossover, and you can, like I think when you pick a particular publication up, like you like if you're even a little bit in touch, you'll know like, oh, this is OSR for sure, right?
Okay.
And then there's other stuff that's kind of like, uh I don't know, like it kind maybe it kind of is, but like stuff is starting to like hybridize and meld together at this point. Um, and I like that. I think there's a third school of thought really that places you like smack dab in the middle, and you can go either way. Um, I'm into dungeon crawling, and I'm into like vast story plots too. Um, just depends
Yeah,
on what players want.
yeah. I'm the kind of guy. I've I've been the game master more than I've been a player in a lot of the games that I played. We were talking about the Discord before, so we play all the games over that, and I am rules light, story driven. Kind of like, I'm
I'm
not
more
gonna
and more
let
that way. Yeah,
I'm not gonna let. We're not gonna sit there and argue over a rule for 10 minutes when we could have already made our way through the story and things like that.
yeah. I honestly um I think some of the best DMs get to a point where the rules are kind of secondary. Um, and like we played a game this last Thanksgiving, that was kind of based off of, uh Ben from Questing Beast maze rats, and I think I like added Constitution to the list of abilities or whatever, and like it got to a point where I wasn't even asking players what their character's ability score was. I was just asking them, "What do you do?" They would tell me what they wanted their character to do. I'd tell them roll that d20, and they told me a number, and I kind of just instantly knew, yeah, okay, this happens, or no, that didn't quite. Um, you you get to a point where like you're almost beyond doing the math in your head. Like, um, it's almost like you're reading tarot or runes or something. Like you're just reading the dice as they're being thrown. Um, but that really helps move the story along for sure.
Yeah, and when you said before, some people just don't like Dungeons and Dragons. I am one of those people. I've had such a bad taste in my mouth from Dungeons and Dragons early
Yeah.
on because I think everybody started off with Dungeons and Dragons. And I've played with so many rules lawyers that it's just like it sucks all the fun out of the game.
Yeah.
And when I stopped playing and people said, "Hey, do you want to play? Hey, do you want to play?" Not with those people, or like not with you guys right now. I want to play. I don't want to debate.
I think I lucked out. Like I don't really have too many memories of people like harping on the rules, uh, or being rules lawyers or whatever. Most of the people I've played with are, we're just kind of went with the flow. Um,
That's good.
you yeah, I don't know. It everybody's different. There's all kinds of styles of DMing. I I kind of tend to give the players what they want. I like to do this thing that I call yes, but. So like a player says, "I want to do this thing," and instead of saying like, "No, you can't do that. That's ridiculous," um, or "Yeah, whatever, go ahead. You can do whatever you want." Um, I'll say, "Okay, like you can do that, but here's what happens," and you're gonna have
Yeah.
to deal with that, right?
Yeah.
And that tends to work out. Like the player gets what they want, but then they also have this challenge that they weren't anticipating that they have to deal with, and it helps propel the game forward a little bit.
Yeah, and it puts a little more excitement in it. It gives a little more reward to the risk of whatever it is you want to do.
Right, right. And yeah, they'll think twice about it next time, right?
Yeah. So, let's kind of talk about Disonismics, which is that's your first game, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh,
Uh, I read a little bit about what it was. I can't quite wrap my head around it, which I think is awesome, and it kind of gives me makes me want to pick it up for the $5 on itch or whatever. But can you kind of give a little bit of just a brief overview?
sure. I probably should have put some kind of disclaimer that it's really not for beginners. I think experienced role players will kind of know what I'm talking about and be able to sort through it. And I have to admit I might not have done the best job at boiling stuff down. But there's basically there's three things I was trying to do different, right? So one of them is I like the idea that you can have a character in one game who is the avatar or the dream self or whatever of a character in a totally different game, right? And you can like setting jump. You can, for instance, let's say, are you like Troika?
I've heard of it. I've never played it.
Let's say you have like a character in Troika that's like whatever, a necromancer or something. And then you have a character in Disonismics that's like a healer, right? You could set it up theoretically, so that like every time the healer in Disonismics successfully heals a character, the necromancer in Troika gets some kind of inspiration or experience for that.
Yeah.
So basically, your experience is currency that you can spend from one setting to another, right? So I wanted to create this like multiple worlds thing where you weren't necessarily playing a separate game every time or a separate character every time, but there was a thread throughout all of them. Because I come from, like, we used to go up, my grandparents had a dairy farm, and my cousins and I would spend a week up there every summer, and we would play a game that lasted all week long, and we would play like 4-6 hours every day for a week.
Wow.
So it became this sort of like this like long haul experience, I guess. So Disonismics is kind of aimed at that. Like, it's not meant to be like a one-shot thing. Some people aren't gonna use it. Like, it's not gonna be for them. The second thing I wanted to do was let me check my notes here.
That's all right.
Oh, right. So I have this thing I call the fractal trinity system, and
Sounds trippy.
it kind of the basic is everything comes in threes, right? 3 is a simple number to get, like three levels of weapon damage, 3 levels of this, 3 levels of that. Everything comes in threes, right? It keeps things sort of simple, and it lets you expand outwards in a way that you can sort of wrap your head around and keep organized. So the whole premise of the game has this principle sort of at its foundation, which is if you were to take how role-playing games function, right, and make a map, and then take how like psychological therapy functions, and make a map of that, and then take like ritual or sympathetic magic and how that functions, and make a map of that. If you overlaid those 3 maps, right, there'd be a lot of points where all 3 of them lined up. And if you connect those dots, you get a whole other map.
Wow.
And that's what I wanted to do with Disonismics.
Holy hell, that is awesome.
So part of that, and I know a lot of people won't like this, part of that is the terminology used, right? So I don't use NPC. Any experienced role player is going to know that an auxiliary ego is an NPC, But the term they use in psychology when you're doing role playing exercises, the term they use for an NPC is an auxiliary ego.
Hmm.
I kind of like I'm messing with the ontology a little bit, is what I'm trying to do. uh, and then the third thing is I'm really interested in mechanics and mechanisms of play, because that is the structure that the fabric of the simulation is draped over. Right? Um, if you don't have mechanics, you're not playing a game. You're just pretending, right? Um, so if you look at game mechanics in tabletop games as like computer code, right? Again, you have these three layers, and if computer code is like a language, then it stands to reason that game mechanics are like a language.
Mm-hmm.
So you can speak multiple languages, right? And if you're fluent enough in any two languages, you can translate back and forth. Um, so that's another thing I want to do, is sort of suggest to people like, hey, maybe you really like this monster from this one game, but like the stat blocks don't sync up with the game you're playing. There's got to be a way to translate that, and theoretically, Disonismics is here to help with that.
Nice. That's
Really just
pretty
the
trippy.
or the tip of the iceberg, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of. It's been like 2 years in the making, and it was kind of overly ambitious of me. Um, and I originally was working on, like, it was going to be like a thick tomb or whatever.
Mm.
What happened was two things. Like, I just saw everybody around me putting stuff out. Like, stuff was just coming out, coming out, coming out, coming out. And I was like, I'm never gonna get this out, like, in the public eye. Like, nobody's ever gonna see this. I'm just gonna work on it till I'm dead. And the other thing was, every time I thought I came up with a cool idea that nobody'd ever done, um, like a week later, I'd find a game and somebody did it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, maybe I gotta look at this differently and do it in like more bite-sized chunks. Um, so that's when I was like, it has to be a zine. Um, and I think I tried to stuff too much into the first issue, maybe. So it's a little dense. Um, I I gave it to a friend of mine to check out, and wasn't he didn't pull any punches with his constructive criticism, and I agreed with pretty much every point that he had, which was that while he liked the artwork, it wasn't big enough. Um, because I tried to do the mothership thing where no space went unwaste, or no space was wasted at all.
Mm-hmm.
um, but for me, that meant kind of like scaling down the artwork and stuff. Um, and it's wordy. Um, there's a lot of mechanics that probably don't need to be there. Um, we'll we'll get into that when you ask me about um, using Hypnagogic as a horror game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think as you see Disonismics evolve, it'll sort of stuff will start to breathe a little bit more. And for the second issue here, one of the things I want to do is have like an extended example of play. Because a couple people that have like read the first issue are like, okay, it kind of makes sense, but I'm fuzzy. So I want to like try and clear everything up for people. And part of that is letting people know that once you, this is my personal opinion, and it goes for any game. But once you get the game to your table, it is your game.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's rules you don't want to use, don't use them. If there's rules somebody else wrote that you want to use, do it. It's yours once it gets to the table.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So let's kind of move on to what we're really here to talk about, which is Hypnagogic Jerks. So Kickstarter is where you're going to be launching this, and as of right now, you are a little over halfway to your goal. So Kickstarter seems to be a large endeavor from what I've seen. I've heard people have nightmares with it, and I've heard people have huge successes with it. Seems like people who create their own game with their own rules, it can kind of be hit or miss. So what made you want to go the Kickstarter route instead of something like you have an itch account, adding it to itch, or
Right.
maybe I'm not even sure how else you would do it, or go through drive through RPG or something like that.
Right. Because Kickstarter has a built-in community around it at this point, especially Zine Quest.
Yeah.
All you got to do is get on Facebook and join one of these RPG groups. RPG Zine, shout out, man. It's an excellent group.
Yeah, I love that group.
It becomes clear very quickly that Kickstarter, Zine Quest in particular, is an excellent way to get your stuff out there into people's headspace. So that's why I wanted to do it. You still see like Merkborg is all over Kickstarter, and they what this last one of these last projects they raised like $111,000 in like 7 minutes or something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, it's got a built-in audience. I didn't do Kickstarter for Disonismics. It is a little intimidating, for sure. But how I kind of cope with that is just keeping everything simple, real simple. You got to think about, how many copies can you. I kind of look at it as what could I do on my own without Kickstarter, and then if I could make it happen without Kickstarter, great, let's do it on Kickstarter, and that just makes it that much easier to accomplish, right? And then once you kind of once you kind of pull the trigger on it, you start to realize it's not that bad. It's not that daunting, especially if you keep it simple.
Yeah.
I kind of.
So
Oh, sorry.
sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I've not been known to be the best like at selling my own stuff, at hyping my own stuff. Um, so it kind of helps if you have that uh mentality, if you can like talk yourself up and keep people engaged. Like I I don't want to keep bugging people about like, hey, I told you yesterday, but I'm telling you again today. I got this thing on Kickstarter. Um, I don't know. Like I feel like I don't want that done to me. So um, but that's part of what you got to do. You got to keep reminding people because somebody might see a post one day and think like, oh, that's cool. Like I would think about backing, and a second later they're fucking distracted by something else
Yeah.
and it's gone.
Yeah, and
So
especially right now they're doing the
yeah,
uh, Kickstart Make 100, and then I think next month is Zine Quest. So
yeah,
it's going to be saturated with ads and
yeah.
stuff like that.
I'm kind of losing my mind a little bit as far as like how I'm how I'm going to back all these.
Yeah, yeah,
I want to back because a lot of them sound really cool.
yeah. There's a lot of them that are really cool sounding. Um, so we all know that backing doesn't mean buying. You see the
Right,
disclaimer on Kickstarter all the time.
right.
But the backer incentives are pretty cool with this, and after looking at the backer incentives on Hypnagogic Jerks, I actually upped mine a bit because
Okay.
having my name inside of a game that I think is going to be really awesome and having a physical copy of it, that's something that I like, and that's something I can show to like, hey, I'm in
Yeah,
this game, or I help support this game. Let's play this game.
yeah.
Can you kind of explain a couple of the backer incentives and what your ultimate number is that you'd like to reach?
Um, yeah, for sure. The backer goals. Um, I I guess firstly I should mention I have a weird thing with numbers, sort of a mild interest in numerology. Um, but you'll see even in like Disonismics and stuff, there's like a set of numbers that I use over and over and over and over again. Um, and so like the $13 tier, and there's like a $57 tier. Um, these are all numbers that I use over and over and over again for everything. Like even like photo editing, when you add when I add contrast to an image or something, um, I do it in like these increments or whatever. So there's that. Um,
Interesting.
I it was suggested that for beginner, you don't really do more than like 5 tiers. So I kept that in mind. And then I just went and I looked at what other people had done in the past, and the the like putting backers' names in the actual publication, that was just like a no-brainer. Um, people do it on YouTube all the time. They shout out to their Patreons or whatever.
Absolutely.
That was a no-brainer. And there was a I don't think it was a role-playing zine, but it was another zine from like a year or two ago. And I saw that in one of their higher tiers, um, your pledge got one of the lower tiers. Like they picked a random person that pledged like $1 and sent a physical copy to that person,
Oh, cool.
and the person at the higher tier paid for it. Right. I thought that was really cool, like a sort of like pay it forward type thing.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and then I'm trying to I'm trying to get back into actually illustrating. I'm a little rusty. So a lot of people do like original artwork for backers at like the higher levels. And I thought that was a cool idea. Um, you're not making any promises as far as what you're going to get,
Yeah.
but if you dig the artwork in the zine, then there's a good chance you'll dig the artwork that you're going to get. It's an original. Um, so yeah, I just kind of wanted to do stuff that was slightly different without getting too nuts with it.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that really drew me to the game was, the like the rules light portion of it. And I tend to overthink things when I'm learning a new game with new mechanics, and I know a lot of people are like that. How would you how would you describe the ease of play? If someone had never heard of Hypnagogic Jerks, picked it up, wanted to play it, could they play it right after reading through, or would it take a little bit?
Ease of play for hypnagogic jerks, particularly.
Yes.
All right, so well, you're familiar with In the Light of a Ghost Star.
Yeah, actually, I just had it next to my desk, and my wife moved my things around. But yeah,
that is also Nate Trem.
okay.
I hope I pronounced that right. I'm not sure. Dude is brilliant, right? So check out the game Prol. All like if you want to talk about like boiling down mechanics into an easily digestible system that you can understand really quickly, Prol is excellent for that. You can learn how to play Prol with a JPEG image. Like the rules are literally in the character sheet. The rules are the character sheet. The character sheet is the rules. It's so magnificently simple. It's amazing.
Nice.
So you basically have abilities, right? And on the character sheet, there's boxes, right? So whenever you have to resolve conflict, right? You flip a coin, right? Does my character scale the wall? Flip a coin. Heads, yes. Tails, no, right? Well, if one of your abilities is climbing and you have a box ticked off for that ability, you get to flip an extra coin. Right? That's it. That's the game.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah. So what I did with Hypnagogic Jerks is I just infused that idea with the idea of the 9 intelligences, multiple intelligence theory. So because you're playing in the dream world, you don't have a physical body, right? So your character doesn't really have strength, but they might have bodily intelligence, which means their dream form, right, can do acrobatics or, lift heavy things or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, in a way, it's your typical abilities, but all in your head, right? And then you just apply that mechanic to those abilities where I think there's 9 abilities or 9 intelligences, and there's like a total of 27 boxes, right? And the rules tell you to check off 13. right? So you can make your character however you want, really.
Sorry about that, but we were talking. Let's go ahead and talk about the sleep agents. Since we're talking about dreams, I love the idea of traveling through dreams. It almost got kind of like an Inception vibe when I was looking at it on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I think Inception was definitely an inspiration. Obviously, the architect thing came from Inception. So the DM in Hypnagogic Jerks is the architect. One of the things, now this actually comes from my particular style of play with other games. Back in the day, we used to draw dungeons on graph paper, and we would just lay that out on the table and everybody could see it. You could see the whole dungeon thing. You start thinking like, well, why should they be able to see the whole map? Like their character wouldn't be able to see the whole map, right? So what I started doing, and I got this from another DM whose game I played in, was I went out and got like a really cheap square whiteboard, and would just like draw the dungeon in real time at the table, just the section the players' characters would be able to see at a given time. And that kind of adds, I've seen people do it where they'll take pieces of paper and cover up what shouldn't be seen yet or whatever. So the thinking is that in the dream world, the landscape can sort of morph and change on you, just like in Inception, or your actual dreams. So what I suggest to DMs or architects is that you map on the fly at the table. You'll have to have some pretty decent improvisational skills, but I think a lot of people have fun doing that. I like it. So yeah, the map is created as you go, and then the idea of a while back, somebody gifted me this book about lucid dreaming, and I was reading, and I've had a couple lucid dreaming experiences myself. Some people have them all the time. I've had a handful, but there are these. I think Tibetan monks have a term for it or something, but I call them threshold guardians. So when you lucid dream, you can kind of like direct the dream yourself, and you can go. Theoretically, you can like learn things about yourself that could improve your life, or maybe you're not ready to know. And there's these mechanisms in your mind that if your ego or whatever thinks that you're not ready to know, they'll literally try to stop you. I had this dream one time where I was in the car with an ex boss and a coworker, and we stopped at this like gas station, And we all got out of the car, and my boss in the dream said, I'll be right in. I'm just going to call Jared at the store and make sure everything's okay. And something clicked in my head, and I said, wait a second, I'm Jared. And that made me realize I was dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of started walking off, thinking I was going to explore things. And this thing, this thing came up over a hill, and it was like a giant cartoon spider with faces that were like all the Disney characters that were ever created, and they all morphed together and like swirled around and stuff.
Holy shit.
It scared the shit out of me to the point where I just was startled awake.
Yeah, I bet.
So the idea is that those things are in the game, and then the agents that you play are like mechanisms of the mind that are there to either help you along or kind of trip you up on your way to find that tidbit of information that maybe will break you or make you.
Yeah, so are we using like false dreams, or are we actually, can we use like our own personal dreams and import them into the story? So like I feel as though, you know, if a person or a player was to use their own dream or nightmare, you could get a real, like, a true sense of catharsis and actually like reach this threshold in your brain to continue forward or rethink things. And you
Mhm.
know, with that adding to the psychological component of the game, I'm hearing a lot of in Disonismics and in Hypnagogic Jerks and a lot of things that you say. I'm hearing a lot of what I would call magical thinking.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and it's kind of like a introspective look for the outrospective life kind of thing, which is really fascinating. I like that a lot. So, could we possibly use our own dreams and nightmares to kind of
Absolutely.
manipulate?
Absolutely. Um, the only thing I would say is um, just to be mindful of what you're doing. You know, if you're gonna explore the inside of your head, tread lightly. That would be my only uh, disclaimer there. Um, but if you're mindful and you do your research and you know what you're doing, um, role play can be a really powerful tool. Um, I mean, you can start manifesting stuff in your life that you might not have thought was possible before, um, because you maybe didn't think you were capable of having certain qualities or whatever. Um, but now you're playing a character that has those qualities, right? So you start to empathize with that character. Um, in magic, um, you like invoke spirits or gods or goddesses or whatever, and you take on the role, um, and then you can accomplish the thing you're setting out to accomplish. Um, role role plays similar, um, and yeah, I think if you used your own dreams, you could kind of work things out and maybe um, use the game as a sort of um, form of um, divination slash um, uh, symbology codex or whatever. You can start exploring archetypes. You can get into all sorts of nooks and crannies. But yeah, you should probably don't stop with the role playing. Like read up on psychology and stuff, just so you make sure you're not going to like develop some kind of like weird psychosis or something like that, you know?
Yeah, like plant a seed that you didn't even know existed, kind of thing. And if I say the name Grant Morrison, do you know who I'm talking about?
I absolutely know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, this is what I imagine Grant Morrison's mind. This is how I imagine it works.
That's where hypersigil games comes from.
That's kind of what I kind of had that idea after you explained Hypnagogic Jerks a bit. I mean, how you explain Hypnagogic Jerks is exactly how I think Grant Morrison's mind turns.
I could see that. Yeah. That's I'll take the compliment. Yeah.
Yeah. I would as well. Grant Morrison is a genius. And a lot of what you're saying reminds me of a lot of what he says as far as the sigils, the magical thinking, planting seeds that weren't necessarily there, using your inward thoughts that. So, like, for instance, I'm thinking of Hypnagogic Jerks as like, I had a dream. I don't know what it means. Maybe we can play together to help explain to me what it is my mind was thinking, but I don't necessarily understand. And if we interpret it in a way in which it might be negative, we can kind of squash that. Or if it's positive, maybe we can use that to expand on it. And maybe, hopefully, I can think about it and dream about it more and then keep expanding.
Yeah, you can transmute things. You can amplify things. Just depends on what your intention is. Yeah, Grant Morrison is an inspiration. I think they don't like each other, but
Alan Moore's
a huge inspiration too for me.
Yeah, those are two of my favorites. I wish they liked each other.
Yeah, it'd be cool. But yeah, a lot of the thing I think with magic is I personally sort of lean into the psychology part of it, because I think everything is in our minds. I think there's an objective reality, but I think we can only sort of ever be partially in touch with it, like some more than others. Every time you think you got a grip on it, it kind of slips out of your hands. But anyway, the magic, a large part of it, I think, is setting up lines of communication between your subconscious and your conscious ways of thinking, right? So when you dream, your unconscious mind is telling a story, and when you wake up, your conscious mind sometimes is like, what the fuck was that? So if you go and role play and play the game, and all the symbols from your subconscious language are there, you can maybe kind of parse out what your dream was trying to tell you. Maybe. I can't guarantee, but
yeah. So now I feel really bad about asking about if I could use this for a horror setting, because I don't want to ruin anyone's mind, and I don't want to help plant seeds that aren't there. So we'll kind of scratch that one, because that would definitely, I feel as though now hearing a little bit more about it, that would be a perversion of the game. I mean, yes, granted, it is a way that you could play, but unless your person or player wants to go down that dark path for some reason.
Well, yeah, that's number one, is you have to have player consent.
Yeah, absolutely.
I personally don't think, I mean, I think horror as a genre exists for a reason. it's not necessarily always a bad thing to be scared, right?
Yeah.
It's, you know, you could use the horror theme with Hypnagogic Jerks to, let's say theoretically, to get over a fear you have of some kind. So
Yeah,
I
sure.
I wouldn't entirely rule it out. Um, I would just make sure that your players are into it
Yeah.
before you go ahead with it.
Yeah, and you had mentioned role playing being used as a tool for emotional and psychological development. I completely agree with that. We talked a little bit about that because playing for me lets me be something to others that I may not portray to the outside world. Um, like I can be anybody or anything that I want for a few hours,
Yeah,
and and continuing forward in long form game.
yeah.
How has role playing helped you?
It's helped me be more confident, um, and slightly more outgoing. Um, I've always been kind of a shy dude. I trip up on my words a lot, um, and I'm kind of introspective. Um, but role playing has helped me sort of overcome some of that. Maybe a lot of it, um, because on some level you have this duty to give your players a good time, right? Um, if people aren't having fun, they're not going to come back and do it again, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a game. We are supposed to have fun.
Yeah. So you maybe, um, maybe you don't even intend to at first, but you find yourself like doing funny voices or whatever for NPCs. Um, and all it takes is for you to get one laugh, and that's encouragement for you to do it again, and go harder next time. Um,
Absolutely.
so you just start developing this sort of like, um, I wouldn't call it fearlessness entirely, but you kind of learn that it's okay to get out of your comfort zone. And then you just start, you know, in life, it makes it easier to just start taking shots,
Yeah,
um, like I didn't know Exalted would carry Disonismics. I just they provided the email. If you have a game, email this person. So I did. And they were like, "Oh, it looks cool. We'll take it."
that's really
You know.
neat.
Um,
Yeah, Exalted Funeral is one of those places, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but Exalted
oh,
Funeral is one of those places that I go to find the weird and exceptionally different games. And those are my favorite types of games because, I don't like your regular run of the mill type thing. And especially with Hypnagogic Jerks, Disonismics, I am going to pick up because it sounds really cool. And there's something really meta if you can intertwine both games together. I think that would be really awesome. Um,
very good. I'm not exactly sure how that works just yet.
I'm still
That's,
trying to wrap my head around how Disonismics works as well.
yeah,
But the being on Exalted Funeral, for me, if I was an indie game creator, that's like a big check mark on your resume, so to speak, because that's where I found Workborg and
right.
other little different games that I want to get into, and
Yeah,
that's the place that I know where I can go to find these interesting and strange and maybe not your run of the mill dungeon crawl type games.
yeah, yeah. When I first stumbled across Exalted Funeral, maybe three 3 years ago. I want to say they had like maybe a dozen items or something. They've definitely kind of blown up in the last year or two. There's always this and Tony from Plus One kind of like addressed this by telling me just keep showing up, dude. But there's always this like imposter syndrome thing where you're like, oh, like they're gonna read it and be like, wait a second, this is shit, you know?
Yeah.
So far that hasn't happened. People are more confused by it than anything, I guess. What my friend that I first asked for opinions from was like, if anything, like people like this just for the layout because the layout's tight. Like, all right, that's cool. That's good enough for now. Like, can work on the other stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, yeah. If I could say anything to people that want to get into it and you know think that it's like hard to get into, it's not. And I'm not a big deal or anything. All you got to do is just do it. Like just take shots. Like I used to work in this machine shop, and it's just a couple years ago, and I didn't know how to run CNC machines, but I told them at the interview like, I'll figure it out. And they were like, okay, and you're gonna go through a period where you feel like you don't know what the fuck you're doing, and people are gonna tell you don't know what the fuck you're doing. But you just persevere, and you'll figure it out. You'll just figure it out. Things start to fall in place. But you gotta keep at it. It's like learning a new language.
Yeah.
Like you learn a couple words and then stop, you're not going to be able to speak.
Yeah. So with as we're kind of winding down here, and so as far as Kickstarter goes, how a successful campaign for this game in particular help propel your ideas for more games and help your brand to grow? I mean, Hyper Sigils Games is now a brand for you.
Right. I'm not entirely sure. I think Kickstarter, like I said, has this built-in audience, so it'll get the brand out there a little bit more. If this particular campaign is successful, I anticipate that it will be. That's another thing, is you just gotta like anticipate that things are gonna work out.
Mm-hmm.
I might, one of the things that might change is I might just print everything from home in the future. We have like when I told my lady that I wanted to do this, she was like, well, you're going to need a printer. And I was like, well, no, you send it out and somebody else prints stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And she went and bought a printer, man, like a nice HP LaserJet. And I was like, well, I don't know if that's quite, the quality, if it's up to snuff or whatever, and started playing around with it. And I don't know, man, I might just, for the meantime, if I'm only doing runs of like 100, 200 copies at a time, and this Kickstarter is successful, that might inform my decision next time around, like whether or not to go with Mixam or something like that.
Very cool.
I went with Mixam for Disonismics, and I'm was pretty pleased. So we'll just have to see, like, but that's one of the things. As far as like expanding the brand, I don't know, man. I'm just kind of going where things seem like they're leading me. I just want to get ideas out there into the community and see. I think more than Kickstarter, I think it's the actual people that I'm making connections with that are going to have ideas that we bounce off of each other that will inform the direction of where the content goes.
Yeah, your peers, and I think I in the RPG Zine Facebook group that I found you in, I've never heard any kind of bad things about anyone's game. Constructive criticism is always there, but it comes from a place of, like, wanting to help people. It's not like a just shitting on your dream. You know what I mean?
Yeah, everybody, as far as I can tell, in that group is super cool.
Yeah.
Questions, like, everybody's enthusiastic to help you out. Yeah, I it's amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
But sorry,
yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I that's part of the whole, when you ask, like, the difference between zines and, like, mainstream publications, you're not going to get that with, like, Wizards of the Coast or whatever.
Yeah. So, Jared, I want to thank you for explaining a little bit about your game, Hypnagogic Jerks and Disonismics, and just who you are and how you think. And I think it's really, really interesting. If you'd be willing, we talked about joining the Rollers of Relay Discord. We'd love to have you. And if you ever wanted to run a game before launch and maybe put it on your Kickstarter or whatever the case may be, we'd love to have you.
All right, man. That sounds great.
Cool, man. Well, I thank you. And Jared's, your Kickstarter can be you can be found on Kickstarter, Hypnagogic Jerks. You can also just look for Jared Wann on Facebook as well. Pretty open guy. He'll talk to you. Also, when are you going to have a Hypersigils webpage, or is it going to be the Hangwire?
For now, it's going to be the Hangwire.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm going to have a separate website at some point. So that'll probably happen before the end of the year. I'd expect maybe a couple months.
Yeah, you can also check out Jared on Itch as well to look at Disonismics. I was just on there before we started. I think it was something at like $5 for the PDF, which is not bad at all.
Yeah.
Sweet, man. Well,
go ahead.
Thanks a lot, man. And I would love to talk to you after the Kickstarter is completely finished, all the rewards are out and all that, to see if how you feel about the game again, and also if there's anything else in the mix that I might be able to get a scoop on.
Right on. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll do that.
Cool, man. Well, thanks a lot, Jared. I appreciate it, dude.
I appreciate it too, man. Thanks a lot.
Have a good one.